we're back in our environment where we did our previous Hello World example back in the first module. What we're going to do here is walk through the logging into the space, setting the target, authenticating, and so forth, a little more in depth than what we did in that obviously simple exercise in the first module. So from any command prompt, once I've installed the Cloud Foundry CLI, I have access to the CF command. So again, if I just type in CF, it shows me all of the things I can do with it. It shows me all the different settings and parameters and sort of flags and things that I can pass into the request. So it gives you a nice overview if you start to forget how to form a command. It makes it really easy to quickly see how should I be consuming it. In our case, what we want to do is start with the API. So if I type in CF API, it shows me what endpoint I'm currently targeting. So you can imagine, again, this may be the environment I use for production. Maybe I have a private cloud that has Pivotal Cloud Foundry installed, or if I just installed the open source bits, I may want to be able to have multiple environments I'm targeting. So if I want to specifically target an environment, I'll type in CF API, and then I'll type in which environment I'm targeting. So in this case, I'll do the same one we already have set here, just for demonstration purposes. All right, let me make sure I'm using HTTPS here. Thank you for the warning. And sure enough, it goes ahead and sets that. It tells me which one I'm in. Now it says I'm not logged in yet. That's where I have to target that. Now at the same time, I can also do a CF target. Now if I know I have multiple orgs and spaces and things like that, I can actually pick a different organization by saying -O for which organization I'd want to target, and -S for what space I'd like to target. We only have one organization there today, so I don't need to set a target for that. We do CF login, and this then asks me for my credentials. I can also pass this all in one command, but in this case, I can set my user account that we set up with the account, and I can type in my password. Once I'm in there, you'll see it's targeting the space development. It shows me my user, my org, Zeroed or plural site, my space development. I have a single space there right now. I can confirm that by just typing in CF spaces. And you'll see I have a single space. Now let's say I wanted to add a new space. I don't remember the command. Let's say I can look at the CF command and I can quickly see, well, they've organized everything by group, feature flag, security, service admin. So maybe I'm going to look, I'm going to try to find out where in the world do I do spaces. Well, I think I just saw space category right there. And as you can see, there's a create space command. In this case, I can just do CF create space. And let's say we call it testing. And sure enough, I can see that I've got now a space called testing. It assigned the roles to that. It put me into that role. So if I do CF spaces again, I should see I have two spaces, development and testing. If I want to drill into a specific space, I can say CF space, let's say development. Let's jump right into that one. And it tells me which org, which apps are there. We've got domains, we've got security groups, and so forth. So we've got some different components there that we've deployed. I can also look at my quota for a particular organization. I can type in CF quota, or CF quotas. And what that'll show me is the quotas for my account. I can see my free tier. I haven't used anything yet. I'm in good shape. The paid, I can see all the sort of information of what's available for my particular quota for this space. Let's say I wanted to change spaces. Let's say I wanted to actually switch into my test space because I've already pushed to development. I'm ready to go ahead and push my bits to the next space. I can do CF target like we did before, but now what I can also do, so I CF target, now I can do -S to switch space, and I might want to switch my space to testing. And sure enough, there I am. So I can see I'm in the org Zeroed or plural site. I'm in the space testing. If I look at CF space testing, there's probably nothing there, since all we did was just create it, no apps. But I can see which domain is tied to it, the shared one, cfapps.io, which security groups it has, and so forth. So that was a quick demonstration of being able to log in, set your target, set your API target if you're targeting different Cloud Foundry environments, authenticating, creating a new space, switching spaces around, and checking out your quotas. That was our first demonstration of logging into our space via the API. Now let's do it in the Pivotal experience. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time in the Pivotal experience, but I do want you to see some of the contrasts of using a graphical user interface that a Cloud Foundry provider might layer on top, and using the CLI that'll work across providers. So in this one, we'll log in, we'll authenticate, and you'll see a little bit of the different experience that the UI gives us. Here we are on our test server, and I'm going to go ahead and open up my browser. and hit the run pivotal.io, and I get prompted to log in. So this is where I want you to type in the credentials you set up for your particular account. And once you log in, you're asked where do you want to go. We'll go to Pivotal Web Services. Close the little prompt up here, and what you'll see is some things very similar to what we did in the command line interface. You'll see now I have two spaces, right? We created the test one via the CLI. You'll see here's my org, Serotor Pluralsight. There's just a single org there. I do see those particular spaces, and each one here, I can see space 1 has an app in it. I can see the second space has no apps and no services. I can see organizational roles here. So I'm an org manager, I have a billing manager, even an auditor. So I can see some of these roles at this level. I can jump into a space like development. And for development, I can also see who's the team involved. So I can see who's in this particular area. I can edit the space. And so some nice experiences here with the command line interface, as well as the UI though. If you want to visually see what's going on, you can see your apps, you can see their status, their instance count. We'll talk more about that shortly. But again, you can see the different spaces. You can easily add spaces at this level as well. Let's talk now about application services. These are the sort of network attached sort of feeling services, right? Remote services I'm attaching to my application. How do they work? What does it mean? How do I do it? So let's talk about services and instances. We talked about in the 12-factor app guidance, it's about connecting all services as attached resources, not assuming they're local. So a service instance is really that on-demand resource. Services provision service instances. So I might have a MySQL database or a MongoDB that's the service that provisions individual databases. So depending on the plan you select, and the marketplace has plans about capacity and sizing, you can get a database for a multi-tenant server, you might be getting dedicated servers, all of that might depend on the nature of the plan you've selected there. So whatever is provisioned for you by a service is a service instance. Really, the service itself is almost a factory that produces service instances. And the CF services command shows you all the service instances you have, and we'll mess around with that. There's really two types of services. There's a managed service instance, and there's user-provided service instances. When we talk about managed services, what this really is these integrate with Cloud Foundry via that service broker, if you remember from the architecture diagram, that implement that service broker API. The service broker advertises the catalog of services. So it says, look, I've got these services available in my marketplace. Here are the different plans available. And it also helps control some of that binding. So once I've chosen a particular service and plan, that broker is able to do creation, binding to apps, deleting, and so forth. Once you've created that managed service instance as one activity, then you bind it to an application with a specific command. What this does is give your instance access to your application, access to the service, so I can talk to the database, so I can pull information from the queue, and so forth. There's multiple ways you can bind those managed services to an app. I can do it in the manifest, as we'll actually demonstrate later on in the course. So when you push the application, it'll bind the application to the instance. There's also a bind command that you can run after you push the application if you want to bind it after the fact. What's nice is once you've bound an application, or a service to an application rather, it's actually described in an environment variable, so you can pull credentials and things like that. User-provided service instances are a way to deliver credentials to apps for a service instance that's already pre-provisioned outside of Cloud Foundry. So this is great if I want to have developers consume external services with their app using the same workflow. So I've already got this service outside, and I define a user-provided service instance so I can give credentials to my app. I'm not actually provisioning the service as part of this. It's already pre-provisioned and working there, but this lets me follow the same flow for binding to an existing service that sits out there. There's a few different deployment options. So Cloud Foundry only requires that that service implements that broker API in order to be available. So whether it's user-provided or managed, there's multiple ways to consume it. So the entire service could be deployed to Cloud Foundry. That actually could be one deployment model where the database or the queue or the cache or whatever it is actually deployed literally within the Cloud Foundry environment. You could also have that broker deploy to Cloud Foundry as a service outside somewhere else. I could actually have the service pushed as an application into one of my spaces, or the entire service could be deployed and maintained outside of Cloud Foundry. So multiple ways the actual service instance could be available to the end customer. At the end of the day, you don't really know and don't have to care because you're always treating them as attached resources. So whether this has been deployed as an app, whether it's deployed and running outside of Cloud Foundry, technically won't matter to you. There's the concept of a plan, as we talked about. So when I'm choosing a plan, I want to make sure I've got the connections available, the size I need, the bandwidth I may need. Because as I start scaling my application, you would notice that connections could start to fail. If I'm being constrained or governed by my service plan, that could come into play there. So as I have a small number of instances, I might want to look for something that offers a lot more connections than I need right now, just to make sure I've got the headroom necessary. Creating a service instance is pretty easy. So the create service command really helps me do this. I can run CF Marketplace, and that'll show me everything available to me. So this shows me everything that's been advertised through the service broker. And then when I call create service, I pass in the name of the service provider I'm looking for. I'm looking for what name of it and what kind of plan. So in this case, Mongo Lab would be the example of the service I wanted. Sandbox is one of the plans. And the third argument is the name of the service instance. And that's anything I want to choose, right? You and I can make a friendly name that makes it really easy for me to understand it. Then, by simply saying CF services, I can then see all of the service instances available to me now in my account. So these are all the instances that my application can have access to if I bind to it. Next up, we're actually going to create a service instance. We're going to browse the marketplace. We'll look at the service. We'll go ahead and create a MongoDB service instance that we'll use for our application. And then we'll go ahead and look at how you manage the instance from the portal, just as a way to do some single sign-on into the Mongo experience. We'll let you see how that whole thing works. Alright, for this exercise, we're going to go ahead and create some instances of a service within our environment, and then actually also switch to the portal so we can see some of the management experience. So what you'll see is I've logged into my space. Now that I had multiple spaces available, I'm actually prompted for which one I want to log into. I chose development. So I'm in my space, just like we ended the last exercise. If I want to see what's advertised by the broker, I can do CF Marketplace. CF Marketplace shows me all the different plans available to me right now in the Pivotal environment. I've got all sorts of services, I've got databases, I've got SQL databases, I've got caching, I've got New Relic, I've got Redis, all sorts of fun stuff, all available to me. What I want to use is the Mongo environment. This is free, so you don't have to worry about paying for anything. You'll see Mongo Lab is the name of the service provider. Sandbox is one of the tiers. You see other ones have all different types of tiers. There's only one right now for the Mongo environment. That's fine. So what I can do is CF create service, and now I want the name of the service that I want to consume. So I'm going to do Mongo Lab. I want which plan I'm interested in. That one is Sandbox. And then what name I want to use. I'm going to call it My Mongo. Pretty quickly comes back and shows me that I've gone ahead and created it. Now I can interrogate that quickly by just doing CF services. And I can see I have one service instance available to me. No bound apps though. I haven't bound it to any apps. That's an empty column. I'm going to switch now to the Pivotal environment. If we'll go back to here, I'll refresh this because obviously this doesn't know what I just did behind the scenes. And I can also switch here to Marketplace, and you'll see this shows me the exact same thing I just saw. So in this case, I could choose to browse this visually and jump into the Mongo experience and click this and view the plan, and I can see exactly what I just did. Here's the Sandbox and so forth. You'll also see here in the development space, that's where I provision this service. So this service is not available to the testing space. I provision a separate service instance. But you'll see it's listed down here. Here's my Mongo. I can delete it. I can do whatever I'd like. You'll also notice a manage link. What's nice is they built a level of integration here with the marketplace providers. So now I'm in the Mongo Lab environment, and I can actually see my environment. I could interrogate my data, see what's going on. There's no collections here yet, of course. All I've done is just provision this. I could see users and tools, and we'll actually use this a little more as we start pushing data here. So what we just did was browse the marketplace, which you can do via CF Marketplace, or if the provider of Cloud Foundry lets you browse visually, you can do that. Issue the create service command, picking the service name, the name of the plan, as well as your friendly name that you'll be using throughout the application code. And then you also can list via CF services and see some details about your services.